talking about this beautiful, wonderful little thing that has within it the power to bring beauty and hope and joy, and at the same time has the capacity to wound and destroy unlike any other force on the planet. Of course, I'm talking about this little guy hiding behind your teeth right now, right? The tongue. This little muscle in our mouth that has power far beyond its size. And every one of us has come face to face with it, right? Every one of us knows the experience of having somebody that we thought we could trust who ran their mouth and took some little thing you thought you could trust them with and sent it around to everybody else. Every one of us knows what it's like to have someone who we admire and look up to, someone whose words make a huge impact in our lives, and to have that person either intentionally or just carelessly say something hurtful or thoughtless or wounding. We know what it's like to be betrayed. We know what it's like to have lies told to us. It may have been long, long ago, but my guess is it doesn't take a whole lot to bring that experience back to your mind. But on the other side, I'm sure most of us in this room know the beautiful gift that it is to have someone who matters to us speak words of hope into our lives. Maybe it was when you were younger and it was someone older or farther along, either professionally in some other way, who saw you and said, "You've got potential. I see something special in you. You should keep doing this. You're good at this." Or, "I like you. I'm proud to be your parent." Whatever it is, the power of the tongue is almost impossible to overstate. And those words stick with us. Say whatever you want about sticks and stones, but there's longevity to the wounds that names can leave, right? That's serious. It can last a long time because bones heal, but sometimes tapes of things that are said to us stick with us for a very, very long time. And so today, we're going to try to do a little bit of tongue training, all right? And my prayer is that we'll walk out of here not only mindful of how powerful our tongues can be and maybe a little more sensitive to avoiding some of the destructive ways we use our mouths, but far more important than just cutting out some bad habits, instead kind of adopting a whole new mission or a new commitment to use our mouths to bring life to the people around us, to bring hope. You know, it's funny. You go to a doctor, what's the first thing the doctor will ask you to do? Stick out your tongue and say, "Ah," right? I don't know that there's actually anything they can tell by that. That may just be sort of part of the ritual. I don't know. I remember as a kid, I would go home after a doctor's appointment and look in the mirror with my tongue hanging out, wondering if there was some little reader sign, like those idiot lights on the dashboard of a car that gave away what was wrong with me, right? But just as a doctor will look in your mouth to determine what's happening physically with your health, at least in part, the same is even more true spiritually. There is perhaps no better indicator of the spiritual state of your soul than your mouth. What comes out of it? That's why the Bible says again and again and again. From the very opening scenes of Scripture where God creates how? By speaking words. Through the experience of the people of Israel in their grumbling after their exodus, and then on into the future in their history, I should say, of sort of on again, off again with God. We see the profound wisdom of the book of Proverbs. We run across it several times in the teaching of Jesus. We see it again and again in the letters of the early church. All this common theme that keeps coming up again and again. Using our tongues well, the danger and power of our mouths. One of the most famous passages on the topic pulls no punches, in very clear terms, calls those of us who are followers of Jesus to a whole new standard of tongue management, all right? And so if you have a Bible, I'm going to ask you to turn there. If you don't, we'll be putting the verses up on the screen behind me. I'll be reading out of the NIV version. James chapter 3. James chapter 3. If you're still getting familiar with where all the books of the Bible are, there are 66 of them. James is toward the end. It's after the book of Hebrews. If you got to Revelation, you went a little too far. James chapter 3. It's page 1065 in my Bible, but that won't help you. So James chapter 3. We're going to spend most of our time here just kind of taking these 12 verses in chunks and digging into what they have to say for us, kind of harvesting the lessons that are here. And in classic James fashion, there is no sugarcoating. I mean, James is one of these full-throttle, double-barrel guys who, when he addresses something, he takes it head on. He doesn't dance around. And so he opens with very sobering words for people like me. Here's what it says, James chapter 3, verse 1. Not many of you should presume to be teachers, my brothers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. What is he saying? He's saying words matter. And if you would be so bold as to put yourself in a place of using words to try to mold or help or direct other people's lives, if you would have the audacity to do that, you should be very careful and sober about that responsibility, because our words matter. This is a verse that I always have sort of hovering in the back of my brain, because this is more than just a little monologue up here for a half hour. I know how important this is, and take that responsibility very seriously. I'm grateful for it anytime I get it. Now, even though I want to be sober-minded, I'm also relieved in some ways by verse 2. And here's what it says. We all stumble in many ways. Okay, now this is something I can relate to, right? We all stumble in many ways. If anyone is never at fault in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to keep his whole body in check. And if that's you, you should leave now. All right? Just go ahead and make your way out the doors. You make the rest of us look bad. But assuming the rest of us are here, we could probably learn a little something from this passage. And he goes on to begin to illustrate. Verse 3, he says, we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, and we can turn a whole animal. Verse 4, or take ships as an example. Although they're so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. This incredibly powerful force. James says this is more than just some casual part of our lives. He's saying the tongue has direction-setting power. In fact, I don't think it's overstating it to say. James says the tongue, in many ways, directs our life. It directs our life. The words we say, the things that come out of our mouths, they go a long way in determining the direction and the destination of our lives. And he uses a couple of illustrations to prove his point. Illustrations that worked in his day, illustrations that still work in ours. Brilliant. For instance, he says, you've seen horses. You probably have. Several years ago, I had a really cool chance. I was part of this little ministry coaching group that was in Louisville, Kentucky. And part of our week-long work with this more senior pastor was he took us to Churchill Downs. And he was friends with the chaplain at Churchill Downs, where they run the Kentucky Derby. And so the chaplain took us on this tour of Churchill Downs, kind of all the backside that nobody ever sees. But there's a huge community of trainers and people that care for the horses and feeding and the jockeys and so on and so forth. And this guy's ministry is specifically to those people who are there much of the year. But I remember this was about a week after the Derby had been run, and the horse that actually won the Derby that year was still there. It was totally on the down low, but the owner didn't want any of the press craziness in the next race, the Belmont, so they kept him there in Louisville. And so I got to see this Derby winner a week after it had won the race, and it was the most spectacular physical thing I've ever seen in my life. It was absolutely beautiful. The muscles, the tendons, you've seen those horses. They're so lean, they are unbelievable to look at. A half ton of unbelievable strength and speed. We also, when we there, met some of the jockeys. Have you ever met a jockey? You can step on a jockey, all right? You got to be careful. They got to make noise when they're walking around, all right? And no offense to those of you who are aspiring jockeys, but I'm talking about 4'10", 90-pounders, these little guys. Now, how in the world does someone this big steer this monstrous piece of raw power, right? The answer is simple. It's that bit. It's that little piece of metal. That little tiny jockey can direct that horse wherever he wants it to go. James says the tongue's the same. Then he uses another illustration, a ship's rudder. One of the things that's always fun in summer around here is a seafair. I don't know if you get to go down to that, or we had been away many of the summers this last couple of years. So last year, we finally got to go to Seafair. And aside from all the fun with the pirates and all that, we went down and toured some of the naval ships that are docked down on the waterfront. And we went through some of the smaller ones, and they're amazing, and a fantastic experience. If you haven't checked that out, it's kind of a fun thing. But the highlight for me of the day was the last stop was the aircraft carrier. Have you ever been on one of these things? I had no sense of how massive these things are, all right? And this was even one of the smaller ones. Several football fields long, several stories high. It was spectacular. It's like a floating city. This massive piece of metal and computer and technology and weaponry and airplanes, all kinds of unbelievable stuff. That massive piece of equipment is all controlled and steered by a relatively small panel of metal, right? And no matter how impressive that warship is, if something's wrong with that rudder, it is dead in the water. That is the most important part of that entire boat. It's maybe 1% of the mass, but it determines where the boat will go. Same goes with our tongue, James says. This relatively small piece of tissue can open doors, it can repair relationships, or it can destroy. It can destroy people, opportunities, it can alienate others. I mean, here we are kind of ramping up into another political presidential season, and sooner or later, one of the infinite number of candidates who are rowing for this, sooner or later one of them is going to say something so stupid, right? Now, granted, there have already been some, honorable mentions, but it's coming, right? There's going to be some whopper that's some casual moment where somebody was videoing with their phone, and some unguarded moment somebody just says something stupid that will, in that moment, kill their political ambitions. One sentence is all it'll take. There's something powerful about our tongues. Now, I'm assuming that we don't have anyone running for president here, although, as I said, with as many as are, I wouldn't be surprised, right? But our words matter just as much. The stakes are just as high as in our lives. In our workplaces, in our relationships, in our homes, in our marriages, in our families. This is not a little deal. This is a big deal. What we say, whether we tear up or we build up or tear down, whether we encourage or criticize, these words can set the course both of our lives and of the lives of the people that are around us. Our tongues direct our lives. So, what's the so what? So choose your words wisely. I mean, honestly, this is fairly obvious stuff. And I'll just be upfront with you. I'm not going to say something today you had never really thought of before. Pretty much we know. These are things I probably shouldn't be saying or doing, and these are things I probably should be saying more in my life, right? But I hope to inspire and challenge you to think and be intentional about that over the course not only of this week, but throughout your life. Our tongue directs our lives, so choose your words wisely. I heard this little story. You may not appreciate it, but I did. It was a story of a guy who had signed up to become a monk. He had enrolled as a Trappist monk, and part of the order that he was going to be a part of, they took a vow of silence and only got to speak 2 words every year. Maybe you've heard this story before. And so the very first year, this guy goes through his entire commitment. He sits down with the Monsignor to say his 2 words. And this young monk, he says, food cold. And another year, he leaves. Goes back to his monking or whatever he's doing, right? Another whole year passes. He comes in again, hasn't said a thing for an entire year, sits down the second year, says, bed hard. And then walks back out, back to his monking, right? Finally, after a 3rd year of silence, he sits down and says to the Monsignor, I quit. And the Monsignor says, well, I'm not surprised. You've done nothing but complain since you got here. He said. I like that story. You may think it's cheesy, but I like that one. Now, I am not necessarily suggesting a vow of silence, although for some of you, it might be worth considering, all right? And we're taking nominations of people you'd like to take a vow of silence. You can write that on your prayer card after the service. But Proverbs 10:19, I think is worth paying a little attention to. Here's what it says. When words are many, sin is not absent, but he who holds his tongue is wise. When words are many, sin is not absent, but he who holds his tongue is wise. Now, depending on what study you cite, experts estimate every day, somewhere between 15,000 and 30,000 words per day, people say. Some of you are overachievers, of course, in this regard, right? But think a little bit about what this proverb says. When words are many, sin is not absent. I mean, just by sheer percentage, the likelihood of committing one of these sins of the tongue goes down if you just shut up, all right? Just be quiet. It could be the single most spiritual thing for some of you to do, right? Just stop talking. Stop talking. You ever been in that moment when a person's talking and they're just making it worse? It's like, would you just stop? Just shut up, all right? This is not helping. Be wise with your words. So this week, when a critical word comes to your mind, that's not to say there aren't legitimate things to bring criticism or feedback. There are healthy ways to do it, and there are destructive ways to do it. But this week, when a critical word comes to your mind, ask yourself, do I need to say this? And if I do, am I just trying to be funny for my coworkers by ripping on the memo that I just got in the email? Am I just trying to make myself look good by belittling my spouse in front of her friends? Am I just trying to, I call it teasing, but am I actually wounding my kid? Do I need to say this? When a juicy nugget about another person that would spice up the conversation, right, or make you look like some sort of insider, what would happen if you just held your tongue? Our tongues direct our lives, so choose your words wisely. When you sit down at Facebook and you see some sort of comment, that impulse to respond, to get into the debate. I have adopted a policy in my life. Before I post anything, I have a friend of mine, that I run it by first. Because I've just found sometimes in a knee-jerk impulse moment, I say the stupidest things. I inadvertently stir up all kinds of hornets' nests when it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. Your pithy little snarky comment on Facebook just isn't worth it, all right? Sometimes it's better to just wait. I have a bit of an issue with this, as you can see, right? Anyway, what in the world was I talking about? Yes, I got myself all lathered up over that one, all right? Be wise with your words, because our tongues direct our lives. James goes on. Let's just go on. James 3. Let's jump down now. We're in verse 5. Likewise, he says, he's compared it to a horse, he's compared it to a rudder. Likewise, he says, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole person, sets the whole course of his life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. It's like, whoa, James, dude. Oh, man, have a drink or something, man. You need to relax. What's going on here? But he's not done. Verse 7, all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and creatures of the sea are being tamed and have been tamed by man. But no man can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. At first blush, it sounds like James is over the top, but let's be honest. Haven't you experienced it? Haven't you seen that fire started? Either by a true or untrue thing? Either by an intentional or unintentional dig or cut that wounds and destroys? James makes it clear, like fire, the tongue has the power to harm or to heal. To harm or to heal. Now, James is very focused on the harm part. We'll talk about the heal in a second. He's comparing it to a fire, and he's not doing it in a nice way. He's talking about all the destructive ways that a tongue can do damage. And sins of the tongue come in lots of different shapes and sizes. One, of course, that instantly comes to mind is gossip, right? Gossip or slander. This is that good old dirty laundry that Doug was just singing about. Now, this just isn't about browsing the magazines as you're checking out at Albertsons. It's not about simply tuning into TMZ or stopping by Yahoo to see who's checked into rehab or who's breaking up or who's getting together or who's pregnant. I mean, frankly, that's all gossip too. Those are real people. But I'm talking more about in our own world, our own lives. It's passing along some tasty morsel of inside information, whether it's true or not, whether it's meant to harm or not. It happens on Facebook, it happens in offices, it happens in school hallways, it happens via Snapchat, it happens in churches. Now, of course, in churches, we've learned to gussy it up a bit, right? And so instead of gossiping, we share prayer requests, right? Now, please don't mishear me. Sharing legitimate needs and asking others to pray is an incredible, beautiful function of the body. On your little card that you received on the way in, there's a place where you can write prayer requests. And you need to know, those don't just sit in a drawer somewhere. Those are entered and prayed over by a whole team of people. Prayed over? I think I just said prayed over. You know what I mean. By a whole team of people, legitimately. But every one of us has sat in what was a prayer request time that went some funky ways, right? Hey, you better add Jim and Sue's 16-year-old daughter to your prayer list. Jim and Sue's daughter? What's up? Oh, you haven't heard? No. Well, just pray for her. Well, I'd kind of like to be able to pray more specifically for her, right? Yeah, that's the best way to try to milk it a little. All right, well, I guess you'll hear sooner or later. I heard she's on meth. No. How did that happen? Well, I don't know for sure, but I heard it was the Williams boy that she's been dating. That snake! I knew he's no good. I'll pray for them. I'll pray, right? Okay, sure, right. Anyway, we've all had those moments where it just takes a turn. We've had those moments in the conversation when things are dying down, and we're tempted to rev it back up with you know what I heard? We've all been in those conversations where things begin to go a direction, and we sit there sort of wondering, wait a second, this started out maybe as a healthy conversation, but suddenly something different has happened. I feel like we may be on the borderline here when it comes to gossip. If you're feeling that check in your spirit, chances are you've hit that line. And it is a bold thing to do, but to in that moment say, you know what, I'm not sure this is a conversation I want to be part of, and I don't mean to be rude, but I'm out. I'm out. There have been times, honestly, in my office when someone has come in and they've sat down, and this is always sort of fun, and they begin to complain about somebody else at the church. I know that's surprising, but it happens, all right? They're upset with some other pastor or with someone else didn't do what they expected them to do or whatever, and they'll begin to voice some of those concerns. And on more than one occasion, I've said, you know what? First of all, let me ask you, have you talked to this person about this yet? And very often it's, no, but I just wanted to bounce it off you first to see what you thought, like that. Okay, yeah, sure, that's what's happening here. Well, you bounced it off me. That person is actually in that office right over there. So why don't you and we're going to walk over there right now and talk to them about this. That has a way of turning the conversation, as you could imagine, right? Suddenly, what was once a big complaint gets soft-pedaled and backed off and all those different kinds of things. And before I give you the wrong impression that I've got this one nailed down, this is absolutely true. Several months ago, I went into one of my coworkers' offices, and I began to let loose on something I was a little frustrated with someone else that I work with. And I went on at some length and in some detail about some of the concerns that I had. And this person said, well, hang on right now. Let's just give that person a call on the phone, and we can talk about what issues need to be resolved. And I learned my lesson. Do not complain to that person. That's what I learned, right? That's what I learned. No, that's not the lesson. That's not the point, not my point. Some of you are like, I was going to come talk to you, Wolfgang, about somebody I got, but not anymore, man, not you. You're going to make me talk to. You know what I'm talking about, right? No, I knew I was over the line. And I was grateful for that person putting me on the spot to say, hey, if you got all this to say to me, we ought to just say it to this person. How different could our relationships be? How much healthier, how much funk could be rooted out if we just talked about stuff, if we just got it out on the table and we did it with the right spirit and with the right love. Anyway, here's a great definition of gossip. Gossip is talking about a situation with someone who is neither part of the problem nor part of the solution. Gossip is talking about a situation with someone who's neither part of the problem or part of the solution. And the Bible has tons to say about gossip. There's one reference up there. You can look it up, but there are many, many more. But there are other sins of the tongue we want to mention quickly. There's false flattery. False flattery. This is buttering somebody up to get what you want from them. Now, in our world, this is often seen as good business. You schmooze the right people. It helps you get ahead. It's networking, right? It just goes with the territory. But false flattery is outside the bounds. I think of it this way. Gossip is saying behind someone's back something you would never say to their face. Flattery is saying something to someone's face that you would never say behind their back, right? It's out of bounds. Then there's complaining. I'm sure no one here struggles with that, so we'll just glaze over that. No, the Bible says, Philippians says, do everything without grumbling or complaining. Can you imagine if suddenly we lost the ability to complain, how much less we would talk? You know? Just by sheer percentage. We have so much to be thankful for. How easy is it to complain? To complain about this or that, our clothes, our jobs, our cars, our spouse, our kids, our church. I can't believe they did a Don Henley song, right? This isn't about making conversation. It's an issue of character. Now, that's not to say that you can't bring healthy feedback and you can't bring ideas, but why have that conversation with someone who can't do anything about it? Why not have it with someone who can actually be part of a solution or help work things out? There are others. Maybe it's lying. You can call it stretching the truth, but it's simply lying. Making up excuses to mask our failure, exaggerating our accomplishments to impress others. Maybe it's crude humor or language. But nothing gets a laugh like a well-placed cuss word, right? Or a good little joke that you ran across online that your friend will get a kick out of. Some edgy little meme that you decide to forward. And, hey, it's just between friends, right? But does that fit with who we are as Christians, followers of Jesus? Maybe it's a few four-letter words when things don't go your way. I'm like, come on, Wolfgang, lighten up. Ain't alive. We're just trying to have some fun here. Yeah, but we have no idea how powerful these things can be. The list goes on. Breaking confidences, sarcastically belittling others, carelessly using the holy name of God or Jesus Christ. Do you ever notice, I've always wondered about this. Do you ever notice when somebody hits their thumb with a hammer, they never say, oh, Buddha, right? They don't say that. That doesn't come out of them. What comes out? Jesus Christ. Oh my God, right? OMG. You know, 2 of the 10 commandments talk directly to the issue of our tongues. 1 is the issue of telling the truth. You shall not give false witness. The other, do not take the Lord's name in vain. Don't treat it casually. Don't use it as an illustration word or an exclamation. Treat it with reverence and respect. What does Paul say? Paul says over in Ephesians 4:29, he says, don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. What if it's just fun? What if it's just friends? What if it's a text? Don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. It's a high standard, friends. Is this something you're working toward? Is this something you're learning about? Because in this verse is not only the diagnosis, it's the solution as well. Instead of this unwholesome talk that tends to bubble out of us, what does Paul offer instead? Only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, to benefit those who listen. So the next time that little piece of gossip comes to your mind, run it through this filter. Is this wholesome? And does it build others up according to their needs? Is this going to benefit those who are listening? That grumble, that exaggeration, whatever it is, run it through that filter. Is it helpful? Does this build up? Because just as we can rattle off all these ways the tongue can do harm, see, this beautiful little gift can heal as well, can't it? I mean, haven't there been times in your life when you have screwed up royally, you have failed? And there is nothing more beautiful than the words of the person you offended coming to you and saying, I forgive you. That hurt, but I forgive you. I can feel that as I say it, because I've been in that place. When you're struggling and you're hurting, you know the power of a friend who can just sit with you, and maybe sometimes even by their silence, but maybe every once in a while, just some word of comfort and encouragement to keep you going. How powerful can that be? It can be an offer of friendship, sometimes even just the voice of a friend when you're feeling that isolation and that loneliness. Maybe it's encouragement when someone's down. Maybe it's offering hope when someone needs it. Maybe it's just responding respectfully to someone when they talk to you. Our words can harm or they can heal. So speak words of life. Speak words of life. I love this little verse in Proverbs 18:21. This is one you could memorize and write somewhere. The tongue has the power of life and death. I don't think that's exaggeration. The tongue has the power of life and death. It's amazing how much power this little muscle has. The power of life or death. Just think back over the last week. Maybe think back over the morning. Were there any times when you showed the power of death with your tongue? Where you maybe sort of let some cutting remark just fly, whether it was just offhanded or it was intentionally malicious, or a belittling word, maybe words that divided or harmed, words that did damage. What about times in this last week when you used your words to bring life, or when someone brought life to you? How can your words bring healing this week? I referenced this earlier, but I was thinking about this incredible truth that according to the Old Testament, the opening scenes of the Bible, God created by speaking. His words had a creative force. Let there be light, and there was light. Words have the power to create. They can create beauty, they can create destruction. And one of my goals in my life is to use my words to create beauty. That's what I want to do. Some words I remember very well as a young guy with my dad and with my grandfather. When we'd go camping or we'd go places or we'd borrow something from somewhere, they'd say always, leave it better than you found it. I'd always say that, leave it better than you found it. You go to a campsite or whatever and somebody else left their trash, you pick theirs up. You walk down the street and you see something's fallen, just pick it up. You borrow something from somebody, you return it, full tank of gas, cleaned up better than it was before, whatever it is. And I've been trying to adapt that in my life because I know people who sort of live by this rule. For them, what their goal is, every interaction with another person, their prayer and hope is to leave that person a little better than they were when they found them. I want to do that with my words. That's what I want to do. So that's a goal for me in every conversation, in every interaction. I want to leave that person a little better than I found them. Not in some false or flattering, artificial way. I mean, whether it's just pausing to really listen and look them in the eye and value them in that way, whether it's offering a sincere compliment, not flattery, but sincere, whether it's praying with them or bringing a different perspective to something they're wrestling with, I want to leave them better than I found them. Can you imagine if just those of us in this service would make that our quest every day? Every interaction, from our family members to the barista at the coffee shop, to the coworker next cube over, whatever it is, if we made that our goal, the tongue can harm or heal, so speak words of life. One last thing about the tongue. Down in verse 9 of James 3. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers, this should not be. Does anyone else see a disconnect there? He says. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? My brothers, can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. What's he saying? James is saying our words are more than just little casual things that bubble out of us. Don't blame me, it's how I was raised or whatever. Our words reveal our heart. They reveal our heart. Sometimes we catch ourselves saying something. Where in the world did that come from? You know where it came from? It came from your heart. It's in you. It's in me. Our words reveal our heart. Jesus himself put it this way in Luke 6. I didn't mark it, but I'll read it here. Luke 6. The good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and the evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. Those words didn't just pop out of the sky. They came from somewhere. They come from our hearts. Our words reveal something deep about us. So look beneath your words. Look beneath your words. What's behind that temptation to gossip? What What is it in you that feels that you need to tear others down or cut others apart so that you can feel better about yourself? What's behind that impulse to constantly complain? What's broken that doesn't allow you to live a grateful, joy-filled life? What's behind that impulse to exaggerate or to blame? Why do I need to impress these people? What's broken in here? What's broken in here that is causing what's broken coming out of here? And are you willing to offer that to God? Because his invitation is not simply to this promise of new life. It's the new life now. It's experiencing a new kind of living where we learn not only to yield our hearts to God, but our tongues as well. To say, this darkness that my words reveal, God, I'm just going to admit it. I'm not going to make excuses for it. I'm not going to pretend it's just who I am. I'm not going to minimize it. God, I ask for your help. James gives a bleak assessment here. James says, no man can control the tongue, but I've learned God can. God can. I love this little verse in Psalm 141, verse 3. It says, set a guard over my mouth, O Lord, keep watch over my lips. Set a guard over my mouth, O Lord. Keep watch over my lips. This is not a verse about dieting, all right? I don't know if Jonathan's going to try to use that in the gluttony message later in this series. What he's talking about here is not what goes into our mouths. He's talking about what comes out of them. Is that something you've invited God into? Or is it something that you just sort of rationalize? It's just who I am. It's just the way I am. Our words direct our lives. Our words have the power to harm or to heal. Our words reveal our hearts. They show who we really are. So choose your words wisely. Find ways to speak words of life and look deeper beneath your words. What do they reveal? All right, so I want to finish by doing a little experiment in the 2 minutes that I have left. And here's what I want to ask you to do. If you have your phone, would you just pull it out right now? Some of you are like, well, I happen to have been checking Facebook, so I have it right here. Well, all right, good. Handy. This is a legitimate pull out your phone in church moment, okay? Go ahead and open up, if you're a texter, go ahead and pop open your text app. And here's what I want to ask you to do. And this may sound cheesy to you, but words have power. I want to ask you right now, literally right now, to pick somebody in your contact list that you're going to just text and just say, hey, I was just sitting here this morning and thinking about you, and I'm glad you're in my life. You can come up with something a little less cheesy than that, probably, right? You know what I mean. But maybe it's a parent. Hey, I know we don't get to talk very much, but I was just thinking about you this morning, and I just wanted to say thanks. I see your influence pop up in my life all the time, and it means the world to me. Or to your spouse, hey, what you did yesterday when you were tired and you still did that chore or you still helped this way or whatever, that really said I love you to me, and I really want you to know how much that means. Maybe it's a neighbor. Hey, I hear some people live next to lunatics. I'm so glad I'm not one of them. You know what I mean? I'm glad you live in your house, and I'm glad you're part of my life. That's sort of an insult of other people, but it's a joke, and it's non-specific, so it's okay, all right? So that's all right. That passes muster. But you get what I'm saying, right? Some of you are looking at me. This means you don't text? Pull out your phone and go ahead and do it right now, seriously. Text in church. I want to hear those little sounds, you know what I mean? Like that crazy little noise that these things make. And just send it off. It was funny, the last 2 hours, we started hearing people's phones popping off in the room here. Ding dong! Like little people are getting texts from one another. Maybe it's the person that led you to Jesus. Hey, this sounds nuts, but I'm sitting in church, and I just realized I don't know how different my life would be if you hadn't told me about Jesus. And so I just want to thank you. I found this great little quote. Mark Twain, he said, I can live for 2 months on one good compliment, he said. There's just something about those words. Some of you that are wondering, what is this strange texting you speak of, right? Okay, so you can go home and send up smoke signals and let people know that you love them. I'm sorry, I'm teasing. But you can write a note or you can give a phone call. Do that today. Do that today. Unleash the power of positive words. One last little image, and then I literally will close us in prayer. Words stick with us. And I don't remember this lady's name, but several years ago I was doing some traveling, part of a ministry group that did some traveling, and I spent some time working with this woman. She had this unique little practice. She carried 5 pennies in her pocket every day. And her goal, with every compliment that she gave someone, every encouraging word, she would move that penny from one pocket to the other. And so her goal was that over the course of the day to have migrated all the pennies from one side to the other. Are you following? And so some days she would sort of make it her goal to see if she could go back and forth, or see how many times she could make it back and forth. But sometimes, here's the bottom line. I do not need to be reminded to do dumb things with my mouth. Stupid words come very naturally for me, all right? But I do need to be reminded to use my words to bring life. And so something that simple, a reminder on your phone, pennies in your pocket, whatever it is, little reminders to say, today, God, today, I will use my tongue not for death, as is my natural way, because I like to complain, and I can be pretty biting when I want to be. But instead, I want to use my words to bring life. I want to use my words to bring life. Some of you maybe want to make that commitment today. Some of you, in the little insert that was in your bulletin when you came in, there's a little tear-off section. And there's a spot on there that you can mark. You know what? I need to make a decision for Jesus. I realize that, man, if I'm going to be judged based on my tongue, then I need grace, all right? I am not good enough on my own, and so I need this grace that you guys talk about. You can mark that. Or I want to be baptized, this beautiful expression that speaks of our faith in Jesus. I'm interested in the next starting point, which is kind of an orientation seminar that we do to help you find your way around North Shore. It's coming up in the fall. And then finally, I will speak words of life into those I encounter this week. I will make a conscious effort to invest in people in that way. What could happen? What could happen? What could happen? Well, I'm anxious to see. Would you just join me if you're able? Would you stand? And we're going to close in prayer. Just stand with me if you can. And let's pray. Oh God, Lord, I thank you for the power of words. I thank you for your word, which reveals so much about your heart and the hope that we can have in you. I thank you for your words that speak over us, words of love and grace, an invitation to be part of your family, but also the parts of your word that go straight at some of the issues that we struggle with, the sin in our lives. Doesn't just brush it off or pretend it's no big deal. It addresses it as the wrong that it is. And it calls us and empowers us to do better. And so, Father, I thank you for that incredible gift. And Lord, I just imagine what could happen if we could take this beautiful creative force that is our mouths and go through this week creating beauty, bringing life to those we encounter. Father, I thank you for these friends. I love being on this adventure with them. And I pray, Father, that you will bless them in extraordinary ways. That those very words, Lord, you'll hear and bring blessing beyond imagination. I thank you for your kindness, oh God. And I pray it in the name of Jesus. Amen.